Millionaire saw a poor single mom returning her daughter's milk. What he did next shocked everyone in a small grocery store on a rainy Tuesday evening. A moment unfolded that would change two lives forever. A single mother, counting coins with trembling hands, had to make an impossible choice. A millionaire businessman, rushing through his shopping, stopped in his tracks. What he witnessed broke his heart. What he did next restored faith in humanity. This is the true story of how one small act of kindness created a ripple effect that touched an entire community. Sometimes the people with the least to give have the biggest hearts. And sometimes, those who have everything need to learn what truly matters. The fluorescent lights of Morton's grocery store hummed their familiar evening song as Sarah Mitchell stood in the checkout line, her daughter Emma's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The clock on the wall read 7:47 p.m., and Sarah's feet ached from the double shift she'd just finished at Miller's Diner. The blue waitress uniform she wore had seen better days, its hem fraying at the edges, the name tag slightly crooked on her chest. Emma, 7 years old, with bright eyes and her father's gentle smile, pressed close to her mother's side. In the shopping basket sat the bare essentials: a loaf of bread, peanut butter, a small bag of rice, pasta, canned vegetables, and 1 gallon of milk. Sarah had counted and recounted the items 3 times before getting in line, calculating every penny in her mind. The woman ahead of them finished her transaction and moved away. Sarah stepped forward, lifting the basket onto the conveyor belt with practiced efficiency. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Donna, who'd seen Sarah come through this line dozens of times, offered a kind smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd learned not to ask how Sarah was doing. "Good evening, honey," Donna said softly, beginning to scan the items. "Evening, Donna," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. Emma tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, can I have the milk for my cereal tomorrow?" Sarah's heart clenched. "Of course, baby. That's why we got it." As Donna scanned each item, Sarah watched the digital display climb: $2.49, $3.99, $4.27. She'd done this math so many times she knew it by heart. Her hand went to the small coin purse in her uniform pocket, fingers touching the bills and coins she'd counted during her 10-minute break at the diner. "That'll be $32.18, Donna announced. Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd calculated $31.50. Somewhere in her exhausted mathematics, she'd made a mistake. Her hand shook as she pulled out the money, counting it once, then twice. $31.47. She was 71 cents short. I'm sorry, Donna. Can you check that again?" Sarah's voice cracked. Donna, understanding flashing in her eyes, ran the items through once more. $32.18, dear. The rice went up 20 cents since last week. 20 cents. Such a small amount. Such an impossible distance. Sarah felt Emma's eyes on her. Felt the weight of the customers behind her in line beginning to shift impatiently. Heat crept up her neck, flushing her cheeks. She'd been so careful. She'd counted everything. How had she missed this? I'll have to put something back," Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the items. The bread, no. Emma needed sandwiches for school. The peanut butter, it had to go with the bread. The rice and pasta were the cheapest calories she could buy. The vegetables, Emma needed something healthy. Her eyes landed on the milk. $4.39. "The milk," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "I'll put the milk back, Mama. No." Emma's small voice cut through the store's ambient noise. "I need milk for my cereal." "We'll use water, baby. It's okay. We've done it before." Sarah couldn't meet her daughter's eyes. Behind them, a man in an expensive charcoal suit checked his watch impatiently. His shopping basket held only a few items: organic produce, a bottle of wine, gourmet cheese. Michael Torres had a dinner party to get to, a board meeting to prepare for, a life that didn't have time for delays. But something in the woman's voice made him look up. What he saw stopped him cold. A mother's hand trembling as she reached for the milk, a little girl's face crumbling as she tried not to cry. A scene of quiet desperation playing out in the harsh fluorescent light of an ordinary grocery store. Donna gently took the milk from Sarah's hand. "New total is $27.79, honey." Sarah counted out the money with shaking fingers, tears threatening to spill. She'd failed. She couldn't even buy her daughter milk. What kind of mother couldn't afford milk? As Donna bagged the groceries, Sarah felt Emma's small hand slip into hers and squeeze. That squeeze said everything. "It's okay, Mama. I understand. I love you anyway." That squeeze broke something inside Sarah's chest. Michael Torres stood frozen, watching as the woman and child gathered their single bag of groceries and walked toward the exit. The woman's shoulders squared in dignity despite the defeat written across her face. The little girl looked back once at the milk being returned to the refrigerated section, then up at her mother with such love and acceptance that Michael felt something shift in his heart. He'd been rushing to a dinner party where each bottle of wine cost more than this woman's entire grocery bill. He'd been annoyed at the delay. He'd been living in a world where a few dollars meant nothing. Watching that mother walk away, her child's hand in hers, both of them pretending everything was okay when nothing was okay, Michael made a decision that would change everything. Michael Torres quickly paid for his own items, barely registering what the cashier said. His mind was elsewhere, following the woman and child who just left. He grabbed his bag and hurried toward the exit, pushing through the glass doors into the cool evening air. The parking lot stretched before him, cars scattered across faded white lines. He spotted them immediately. The woman in the blue uniform walking slowly toward an old Honda Civic that had seen better days. The car's paint was oxidized, one taillight held on with tape, and it sat lower on one side, suggesting worn suspension. Something told Michael to wait, to watch. He'd spent 15 years in business learning to read people, to understand motivations, to see beneath surfaces. This woman interested him in a way he couldn't quite explain. There was something about the dignity in her posture, the care with which she helped her daughter into the car, the way she sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, as if gathering strength for whatever came next. He climbed into his Mercedes, parked 3 rows away, and waited. The Honda started with a cough and a rattle. Michael watched it pull out of the parking lot and turn left onto Madison Street. After a moment's hesitation, he followed. "What am I doing?" he thought. But he didn't turn around. The Honda led him to the older part of town, past apartment complexes with flickering neon signs and corner stores with barred windows. This wasn't Michael's world. He lived in the Heights, where lawns were manicured and security was invisible but omnipresent. This was a place where people struggled, where every dollar mattered, where life was a daily negotiation with hardship. The Honda made several stops, and each one told Michael more of the story. At a small apartment complex, the woman got out with part of her groceries, the bread and peanut butter. She climbed the stairs to a second-floor unit and knocked. An elderly man answered, and even from a distance, Michael could see the gratitude in his face as he accepted the food. 2 more stops followed the same pattern, the woman dividing her meager groceries, sharing with others who had even less. At the last stop, a family with young children, she gave away the canned vegetables, keeping only the rice and pasta for herself and her daughter. Michael sat in his car, stunned. This woman, who couldn't afford milk for her own child, was feeding her neighbors. Finally, the Honda pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Apartments, a complex that desperately needed renovation. The woman and her daughter climbed the stairs to a 3rd-floor unit. Through the thin walls and open windows of the warm evening, Michael could hear their conversation. "Mama, why did we give away our food?" the little girl asked. "Because Mr. Peterson hasn't eaten in 2 days, sweetheart. And the Martinez family, their electricity got shut off. They can't cook anything. We can make rice on our hot plate. But Mama, you're hungry too. I can hear your tummy." A long pause. Then, "I'm okay, baby. I had a big lunch at the diner." Michael knew she was lying. He'd watched her all evening. She was exhausted, running on empty, giving away her food while pretending she was fine. He sat in his car as darkness fell completely, watching the warm light from their small apartment. Through the window, he could see the little girl sitting at a tiny table, doing homework, the mother moving around the efficiency kitchen preparing their simple meal. Michael thought about his own life. The mansion on Hillcrest Drive, the luxury cars, the investment portfolio, the dinner party he was missing. He'd inherited his father's commercial real estate empire, multiplied it several times over, and lived a life of comfort most people couldn't imagine. His father, Ricardo Torres, had died 6 months ago, leaving Michael not just a fortune, but a challenge. "Money makes you wealthy, Mijo, but it doesn't make you rich." Find something worth building that money can't buy. Michael had been annoyed by the philosophical riddle. His father had always spoken in aphorisms, always pushed him towards some greater purpose. Michael couldn't quite grasp. He'd been focused on expanding the business, on making money, on success as the world measured it. But watching this woman, this stranger who gave away bread she couldn't afford, Michael began to understand what his father meant. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "David, it's Michael. I need you to dig up some information for me, quietly." He provided the license plate number of the Honda and the address of Riverside Apartments. "I want to know everything. But David, this stays between us. Nobody knows I'm asking. And I want it by tomorrow morning." As he started his Mercedes and pulled away, Michael glanced once more at the warm square of light 3 floors up. Inside, a mother was teaching her daughter that kindness matters more than comfort, that giving matters more than having, that being good matters more than being okay. Tomorrow, Michael thought, everything changes. But tonight, he had to figure out exactly what that meant. The next morning, Michael sat in his downtown office. The city's skyline spread before him like a kingdom. His desk held the report David had compiled overnight. He'd read it 3 times, and each reading made the ache in his chest grow stronger. Sarah Mitchell, age 34, widowed 3 years ago when her husband James Mitchell, a construction worker, fell from scaffolding at a job site. The insurance payout had barely covered the funeral costs and a few months of rent. No college degree. No family nearby to help. One daughter, Emma, age 7. Sarah worked 2 jobs, daytime waitress at Miller's Diner, evening shifts at a convenience store when she could get them. Monthly income, approximately $1,800. Monthly expenses, $1,300 in rent for a 1-bedroom apartment, $200 for utilities, $300 for food, and whatever remained went to Emma's school supplies and clothes. The report noted that Sarah was 3 months behind on rent. Eviction proceedings would likely begin within the month. But that wasn't what caught Michael's attention. The report included something else: testimony from neighbors. Sarah ran an informal food bank from her apartment, collecting day-old bread from bakeries, organizing clothing swaps, checking on elderly neighbors, tutoring children for free. She was, according to multiple sources, the heart of Riverside. Michael's assistant, Jennifer, knocked and entered. "Your 9 o'clock is here." "Cancel it," Michael said without looking up. "Cancel everything today." Jennifer's eyebrows rose. In 15 years, Michael had never canceled a full day of meetings. Everything? Everything. "And Jennifer, get me the files on the Torres Foundation." His father had established the Torres Foundation 20 years ago, dedicated to community development and poverty relief. Michael had largely ignored it, letting board members run the operations while he signed checks. It had always seemed like a tax write-off, a legacy project, something peripheral to real business. Now, looking at Sarah Mitchell's file, Michael saw it differently. He saw opportunity. Not for profit, but for something his father had tried to teach him: purpose. By noon, Michael had a plan. It wasn't charity. Sarah Mitchell wouldn't accept charity. He'd seen that in the way she'd held her head high in the grocery store, in the dignity she maintained despite her circumstances. She was too proud to take a handout, but she might accept an opportunity. He drove to Miller's Diner, a chrome and tile establishment on the edge of downtown that served breakfast all day and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The lunch rush was in full swing, and Michael spotted Sarah immediately, moving between tables with practiced efficiency, smiling at customers, refilling coffee, taking orders. Even exhausted, even worn down, she brought warmth to every interaction. He took a seat at the counter. Sarah appeared moments later, order pad in hand, that professional smile on her face. Up close, Michael could see the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands from fatigue, the way her uniform hung a bit loose, suggesting she wasn't eating enough. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Coffee, black, and whatever you recommend for lunch." "The meatloaf's good today. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans." "Perfect." As she turned to place the order, Michael said, "I saw you yesterday, at Morton's Grocery." Sarah froze, her back to him. When she turned around, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes defensive. "I don't need your pity, sir. I don't need anything from you." "I'm not offering pity," Michael said calmly. "I'm offering a job." I have 2 jobs already. Not like this one. This one pays $60,000 a year with benefits. Health insurance, dental, vision, 4 weeks paid vacation, retirement contribution. Sarah stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. What kind of job? Community outreach director for the Torres Foundation. Your job would be to do exactly what you're already doing, helping people. Except you'd have resources, a budget, support staff, the ability to actually make a difference instead of just holding things together with duct tape and prayer. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I don't have a degree. I don't have experience. Why would you? You have the only experience that matters. You know what it's like to struggle. You know your community. You know what people need because you've lived it. And more than that. Michael paused, making sure she heard this part. You're already doing the work. I'm just offering to pay you for it. I don't understand. You don't know me. Why would you do this? Michael thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated. That he'd watched her give away food she couldn't afford. That she reminded him of everything his father tried to teach him. That he was tired of making money without making meaning. That sometimes you meet someone who changes your entire perspective in a single moment. But what he said was simpler. Because yesterday I watched you choose between your daughter's milk and your dignity. You chose dignity. You chose to walk out of that store with your head held high, teaching your daughter that you don't give up, you don't beg, you face hard things with grace. And then I watched you give away food you needed to feed people who needed it more. That's not desperation. That's character. That's leadership. That's exactly what this foundation needs. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I can't. I need to think. I need to. Take your time, Michael said. Here's my card. The offer stands. But Sarah, your rent is 3 months overdue. Eviction proceedings start next week. Emma deserves better than a shelter. You deserve better than watching her go through that. He stood, placed 2 $20 bills on the counter for a $12 meal, and walked out before she could refuse. Behind him, Sarah stood holding his business card with shaking hands, customers calling for refills, the lunch rush swirling around her, and a choice before her that seemed too good to be true. That night, after Emma fell asleep on the thin mat they shared in their 1-bedroom apartment, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with Michael Torres's business card in front of her. The cheap overhead light flickered occasionally, a problem she'd reported to the landlord 3 months ago. $60,000 a year. The number seemed impossible. She currently made about $22,000 between both jobs, working 70 hours a week. This would be more than double her income, working normal hours, with benefits that included health insurance, real health insurance, not the catastrophic only plan she couldn't afford to use. Emma could have milk, and fresh fruit, and new shoes when she needed them, not when her current ones fell apart. But Sarah had learned to distrust good fortune. Life had taught her that lesson thoroughly. When James died, everyone had promised to help. Those promises faded within weeks. She learned to rely only on herself, to trust only what she could control. This felt too easy, too perfect. What if it was a mistake? What if she took the job and got fired after a month? She'd have quit her waitressing jobs, burned those bridges, and would be starting over with nothing. She pulled out her laptop, a 5-year-old model that barely worked, and searched for Michael Torres. What she found made her stomach drop. Michael Torres wasn't just wealthy, he was seriously wealthy. Torres Properties owned half the commercial real estate downtown. His estimated net worth was in the 9 figures. Men like that didn't just offer jobs to waitresses and diners. There had to be a catch. Sarah spent 3 hours researching the Torres Foundation. It was legitimate. Established by Ricardo Torres in 2005, it funded community centers, after-school programs, food banks, and affordable housing initiatives. The foundation had a staff of 12 and an annual budget of $3 million. $3 million to help people. What could she do with that kind of money? She thought about Mr. Dam Peterson, the elderly veteran upstairs who chose between medication and food, the Martinez family with the shut-off electricity, the single mothers she met at the food bank who worked just as hard as she did, but couldn't get ahead because childcare cost more than they earned. What if this was real? What if she could actually help? At 2 a.m., Sarah made her decision. She would call Michael Torres in the morning. She would take the chance, because sometimes you had to believe that good things could happen. Sometimes you had to have faith. The next day, Sarah called the number on the card. Michael answered on the second ring. "I'll do it," she said simply. "I'll take the job. When do I start?" "Monday," Michael said. And she could hear the smile in his voice. "Come to the foundation office at 9. We'll get you set up. And Sarah, bring Emma. We have an excellent on-site childcare program, part of your benefits." Sarah hung up and stood in her small kitchen, looking around at the peeling linoleum, the stained countertops, the refrigerator that ran too loud. Soon, she could leave this place. Soon, Emma would have a real bedroom. Soon they would be okay. She allowed herself, for the first time in 3 years, to hope. The weekend passed in a blur of preparations. Sarah bought a simple professional outfit from the thrift store, a black skirt and white blouse that fit well enough. She practiced what she would say, how she would act, how she would prove herself worthy of this chance. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Sarah dressed carefully, helped Emma into her best dress, and took the bus downtown to the address Michael had provided. The Torres Foundation occupied the 3rd floor of a modern building with glass walls and polished marble floors. Jennifer, Michael's assistant, greeted them warmly and led Emma to the child care center, a bright, cheerful space with toys, books, and 2 trained caregivers. Emma, shy at first, was soon drawn in by the other children and the play kitchen in the corner. Then Jennifer took Sarah to a conference room, where Michael waited with 3 other people: the foundation's director of operations, the financial officer, and the legal counsel. Sarah's hand shook as she sat down. This was real. This was actually happening. "Sarah," Michael began, "I want to be clear about something. This isn't charity. I'm not doing you a favor. You're here because the foundation needs what you have: real understanding of the communities we serve, authentic relationships with people who need help, and the moral authority that comes from having walked through hard times yourself. Can you do this job?" Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. "Yes, I can." "Then let's get started." The next 4 hours were overwhelming. Sarah learned about program budgets, grant applications, community partnerships, reporting requirements. Her head spun with information, but she took careful notes, asked questions, and began to see how it all fit together. At lunch, Michael took her to the foundation's program sites: a community center in the neighborhood where she lived, a food bank she'd visited as a recipient, an after-school program in a school Emma would attend. At each stop, Michael introduced her as the new community outreach director. And at each stop, Sarah saw the same things: good intentions hampered by lack of connection to the people being served. Programs designed by people who'd never been poor, administered by people who'd never struggled, missing the mark despite genuine effort. "Tell me what you see," Michael said as they drove back to the office. Sarah took a breath. "I see people trying to help, but I also see that they don't really understand. The food bank is open 9 to 5, but people who need it work those hours. The after-school program costs $20 a week. That's a car payment for some families. The community center is beautiful, but it's intimidating. People who are struggling don't feel welcome in a place that's too nice." Michael nodded. "Fix it." "What? That's your job. Fix it. You have the authority to restructure programs, change hours, waive fees. You have a budget. You have staff. You understand the problems. Now solve them." Sarah felt something ignite in her chest. Not hope, not relief, purpose. "When can I start?" she asked. Michael smiled. "You already have." 6 months later, the Torres Foundation's community programs looked completely different. Sarah had worked 18-hour days that first month. Not because she had to, but because she finally could. She had resources. She had support. She had the power to actually change things. The food bank now operated from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., 3 days a week, and Saturday mornings staffed by volunteers who understood what it meant to need help, because many had been there themselves. Instead of making people stand in line like they were begging, Sarah created a community market model where families could shop with dignity for fresh produce, bread, milk especially, and pantry staples. The after-school program became completely free, funded by corporate partnerships Sarah secured by telling her own story. She'd stood in boardrooms in her thrift store suit and said, "I worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford childcare. My daughter did homework in the diner where I worked, eating leftover fries for dinner. How many kids in this city are doing the same thing right now while their parents work to keep a roof over their heads? How much potential are we wasting? The checks had come. Large checks. The community center transformed from an intimidating building to a genuine hub. Sarah hired people from the neighborhood, people who knew the families, spoke the languages, understood the struggles. She started programs others said wouldn't work. A tool library where people could borrow equipment for home repairs instead of hiring expensive contractors. A clothing swap that operated like a boutique instead of a charity handout. Resume workshops run by people who'd successfully climbed out of poverty themselves. Every decision Sarah made came from one question. What would have helped me when I needed it most? And it worked. Word spread. More families came. More volunteers signed up. More donors contributed. The Taurus Foundation's community programs became a model that other cities studied. But the real transformation was in Sarah herself. She walked differently now. Not the exhausted shuffle of someone barely surviving, but the confident stride of someone who knew her worth. She spoke differently, with the authority of someone who'd lived in both worlds and could translate between them. She dressed differently, in professional clothes she could finally afford, chosen from real stores instead of thrift shops. Emma thrived, too. She attended a good school, had health insurance, lived in a safe apartment with her own bedroom. She took piano lessons and swimming classes. She had friends over for playdates. She was just a kid, allowed to be a kid, not a small adult worried about her mother. One Thursday evening, Sarah stood in the community market, watching families shop. She saw herself in them. The careful calculations, the hard choices, the quiet desperation masked by determination. But now she could help. Now she could make sure no mother had to choose between milk and dignity. "You've done something remarkable here," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to find Michael Torres. He visited the programs regularly, but always quietly, never making a fuss. He preferred to observe, to understand, to learn. "We've done something remarkable," Sarah corrected. "This only works because you gave me the chance. I gave you the opportunity. You did the work." Michael paused. "I want to talk to you about expanding. We've had inquiries from 4 other cities wanting to replicate this model. I'd like you to lead that expansion. It would mean travel, a larger team, a bigger budget. It would mean your salary increases to $90,000 a year." Sarah shook her head, laughing. "A year ago I was returning milk because I was $3 short. Now you want to pay me $90,000 to help people across the country?" "Yes. Because you're exceptional at this. Because you understand something most people in this field don't. That poverty isn't a moral failing, it's a circumstance. And circumstances can change with the right support." Sarah looked around the market. A young mother was carefully selecting fresh vegetables. Her toddler balanced on her hip. An elderly man filled his bag with bread and canned goods, chatting with a volunteer who treated him like a friend, not a charity case. A teenager helped his family shop, his eyes bright with relief that they'd have good food this week. "I need to think about it," Sarah said. The travel would mean less time with Emma. "Bring her with you sometimes. Let her see what her mother is building. Let her understand that hard times don't define you, what you do with them does." That night, Sarah sat with Emma at their small kitchen table in their new apartment, still modest, but clean and safe, and theirs. Emma did her homework while Sarah reviewed expansion proposals. "Mama?" Emma looked up from her math worksheet. "Do you remember when we couldn't buy milk?" Sarah's heart clenched. "I do, baby. I think about it sometimes. I used to be embarrassed, but now I think maybe it was supposed to happen." "Why do you say that?" "Because that's when the nice man saw us, and that's when everything changed. And now you help lots of families so they don't have to feel bad in the grocery store." Emma smiled. "So maybe it was supposed to happen. Maybe something good can come from something sad." Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, tears streaming down her face. Out of the mouths of babes came wisdom. From hardship came purpose. From one moment of witnessed desperation came a program that had helped thousands of families. "You're right, sweetheart. Something very good came from something very sad." Later, Sarah called Michael. "I'll do it. I'll lead the expansion. We'll help families in every city we can reach. No one should have to choose between milk and dignity. No one should have to struggle alone. Thank you, Sarah. You're changing the world, one family at a time." After she hung up, Sarah stood at her window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, mothers were making impossible choices. Somewhere, children were going to bed hungry. Somewhere, people were struggling with quiet desperation. But now, Sarah had the power to help, and she would. Because she'd been there, because she remembered, because she knew that everyone deserves a chance. 2 years after that day in the grocery store, Sarah Mitchell stood on a stage at the National Community Development Conference, addressing an audience of 500 nonprofit leaders, city officials, and philanthropists. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair styled professionally, confidence radiating from every gesture. 2 years ago, she began, her voice clear and strong. "I was a single mother working 2 jobs and still couldn't afford to buy my daughter milk. I stood in a grocery store checkout line counting coins with shaking hands and realized I was 71 cents short. I had to choose between my child's milk and my dignity." The audience was silent, leaning forward. I chose dignity. I put the milk back. I walked out of that store with my head held high, teaching my 7-year-old daughter that we face hard things with grace, even when our hearts are breaking. What I didn't know was that someone was watching. Someone who saw not my poverty, but my character. Someone who recognized that the person who gives away bread she can't afford is exactly the person who should be leading poverty relief programs. Sarah paused, finding Michael Torres in the 3rd row. He smiled encouragement. Michael Torres gave me more than a job. He gave me purpose. He gave me the opportunity to transform my pain into power. The power to help others facing the same struggles I faced. Today, the Torres Foundation's community programs serve 12,000 families across 8 cities. We've prevented 473 evictions. We've provided 1.2 million meals. We've helped 612 people find stable employment. The audience applauded, but Sarah raised her hand. "But those are just numbers. Let me tell you what they really mean. They mean Maria Rodriguez didn't have to choose between her child's asthma medication and rent. They mean James Chen, a veteran, gets the support here in serving our country. They mean kids like my daughter Emma get to be kids fed, safe, loved, and hopeful about their futures." Sarah's voice grew passionate. "The truth is this: poverty isn't a character flaw, it's a circumstance. And circumstances can change with the right support, the right opportunities, and the right people willing to invest in human potential rather than just writing checks." She clicked to the next slide, showing before and after photos of the communities the foundation served. "We succeed because we remember that behind every statistic is a person. Behind every program is a family. Behind every dollar spent is a life potentially changed. We succeed because the people running our programs are distant administrators. They're community members who've lived these struggles themselves. They understand that dignity matters as much as dollars. That respect matters as much as resources. That empowerment matters more than charity." Sarah shared story after story: the single father who'd gone from homeless to housed to employed as a community outreach specialist, the grandmother raising her grandchildren who now ran the food market Sarah had designed, the teenager who'd aged out of foster care and found support, education, and opportunity through foundation programs. Each of these people had potential. They just needed someone to see it, believe in it, and invest in it. That's what Michael Torres did for me. That's what we now do for thousands of others. She concluded with the words her daughter had spoken 2 years ago. "Maybe something good can come from something sad. Maybe our hardest moments prepare us for our greatest purpose. Maybe the people with the least to give sometimes have the biggest hearts. And maybe, just maybe, when we reach down to help someone up, we discover that we're lifting ourselves higher too." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. But what mattered most to Sarah wasn't the applause. It was what came after. Throughout the conference, dozens of leaders approached her, wanting to replicate the model in their cities, wanting to understand how to serve with dignity, wanting to learn from someone who'd actually lived on both sides of the poverty line. That evening, Sarah and Emma celebrated at a nice restaurant, the kind of place Sarah had once walked past, never imagining she'd eat there. Emma, now 9 years old, ordered without looking at prices. She had milk with her dinner, chocolate milk, because she could. Mama, Emma said, remember when you told me about the day in the grocery store? I do, sweetheart. I'm glad it happened. Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You are? Yeah, because if it hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here now. You wouldn't be helping all those families. I wouldn't have my own room and my piano lessons. Mr. Peterson wouldn't have his new medicine. The Martinez kids wouldn't have gone to camp last summer. Emma smiled. Bad things can turn into good things if you don't give up. Sarah reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. You are wise beyond your years, baby girl. I learned from the best, Emma said simply. Later that night, after Emma fell asleep in her own bed in their comfortable apartment, Sarah stood at the window, looking out at the city. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Proud of you today. You're changing the world. She replied, thank you for giving me the chance. Thank you for seeing who I could become instead of just who I was. His response came quickly. I saw who you already were. I just gave you the resources to do it on a bigger scale. The courage, the compassion, the character that was always you. Sarah thought about the journey, from a woman counting coins with shaking hands to a leader transforming communities across the country, from putting back a gallon of milk to ensuring thousands of families never had to make that choice. From surviving to thriving to helping others do the same. She thought about the grocery store 2 years ago. That moment of humiliation that became a moment of transformation. That instant of witness desperation that sparked a movement of dignified support. That painful choice that led to powerful change. Sometimes, she reflected, our lowest moments become the foundation for our highest achievements. Sometimes the people who struggled the hardest make the best leaders. Sometimes all someone needs is for one person to believe in their potential. And sometimes, when you're blessed enough to move from receiving help to giving it, you discover that the greatest gift isn't what you receive, it's what you're able to give back. Sarah had been given a chance. She'd taken that chance and multiplied it into opportunities for thousands. And she was just getting started, because she remembered what it felt like to be $3 short with the daughter watching. She would spend the rest of her life making sure other mothers didn't have to feel that way, because she knew that dignity mattered as much as dollars. She would build programs that honored people instead of pitying them. Because she understood that circumstances don't define character, she would invest in human potential wherever she found it. And because someone had once seen past her circumstances to her character, she would spend her life doing the same for others. The milk she couldn't afford had become the catalyst that fed thousands. And that, Sarah thought, was grace in action. Sarah Mitchell's story teaches us that our hardest moments don't define us. They prepare us. When we face struggles with dignity, when we maintain our compassion even when we're suffering, when we give even when we have little, we build the character that can change the world. True wealth isn't measured by what we have, but by what we give and how we lift others. Sometimes the people with the least to give have the biggest hearts. Sometimes one person seeing your worth can change everything. And sometimes the lowest point in your life becomes the foundation for your greatest purpose. Never give up in hard times. Your character in difficult moments defines your destiny. Help others even when you're struggling. Compassion creates ripples that return to you multiplied. Accept help when it's offered with genuine respect. Believe in your own worth, even when circumstances say otherwise. Use your pain to fuel your purpose. Remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Treat them with kindness and dignity. And most importantly, the person you are in your worst moments reveals the person you can become in your best moments. If Sarah's story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories of faith, perseverance, and the power of human kindness. Remember, you might be someone's Michael Torres, today the person who sees potential instead of problems, who offers opportunity instead of pity. Or you might be someone's Sarah Mitchell, struggling now, but preparing for something greater. Either way, never underestimate the power of one moment, one choice, one act of kindness. It can change everything.